Welcome to this week's edition of Business Insight, and in this show we are focusing on matters grain and grain trade, and we are honored in this show to have the East African Grain Council CEO Gerald Masila. Welcome to the show. I'm Victoria Amunga. The post-harvest loss has been a menace in this country. What is the extent of it?
So we look at post-harvest loss being in several ways. Number one, if you have not stored and dried your grain quickly and nicely, therefore it gets to start rotting and getting moldy so that it doesn't become fit for human consumption, that is a loss. It's a post-harvest loss. A post-harvest loss also occurs when you have weevils and other rodents and insects and pests that can come and consume that grain and disintegrate it, and therefore again it ends up not to be fit or even consumed by human beings, and therefore that becomes a post-harvest loss. In some instances, we have had an almost entire harvest infected, say, by aflatoxin, and when it's tested and the levels are way beyond what is allowed for human consumption, then that grain cannot be allowed to go through the food markets, the food chain, and therefore it has to be taken out of it, and it becomes a loss. And especially again in those areas of Eastern where it's a lot more warmer and more humid, you have the larger grain borer, LGB, that is a serious threat. And the larger grain borer can really consume a whole bag of maize in just a couple of days. And it works on it so much so that what is left at the end of the day even can't be any nutritious to even chicken or any other thing. So that becomes a problem. So that whole range of the losses, which sometimes can range from 15–20%, sometimes 30%, and as I said, on some rare cases it can go all the way to 100%, is a very serious matter. Why are we very concerned about post-harvest losses? We say that if we can institute good post-harvest handling and management practices among our farmers and the people in the value chain, and you save those losses, you will be availing a lot more food grain into the food chain. And availing that a lot more grain into the food chain will mean more income to the producer, because when you lose grain post-harvest, then it means you have lost income. But there's also going to be a lot more available to the consumers. And so with more increased supply, therefore there won't be a lot of pressure on prices. So reducing post-harvest losses is actually another method of price management, managing the price volatility. So you'll have a better situation where prices are more stabilized over time from one harvest to the other.
Let's talk about the market opportunities. What are the opportunities of the business-to-business market in the region?
What we have is that in the crop calendar, there's you start with your land preparation, you got your planting, the rains come, you do all the necessary top dressing and everything else to eventually harvest. So there's a time to plant, like Ecclesiastes says, and a time to harvest. And so what you find in the Eastern Africa region is that these times are different for the different countries. So when Tanzania is planting, it's not when Kenya is planting, or Uganda or Rwanda, or which of the cases, and the same case when it comes to harvesting. So what we have in our Eastern Africa crop calendar is that you have almost a relay baton process, where if I start from around January, February, you'd be having Kenya finishing its harvesting and getting the grains into the granaries, because the crop matures around November, October, November. So the real main harvesting season is November, December, January. So January, February, somewhere there, you have a lot more grains available in Kenya. That's when we are finishing the harvesting, we are drying the maize, we are putting it in the granaries and in the silos. At that time, the harvest in Uganda is not ready, and the harvest in Tanzania is not ready. And in those months, you find Kenya trading maize to Tanzania and even trading maize to a few other countries in the region. Soon after the Kenya season is over, Uganda season kicks in. So the Uganda maize gets ready. Uganda is bimodal, so they harvest twice in a year. So the Uganda harvest comes in from around April there, around April, May, towards June. And it also, you know, the grains are dried and they get into the market. And by that time, the prices in Kenya actually are much better than the prices in Uganda. So the Kenya market becomes a very good opportunity for producers in Uganda to trade good grain, good maize into Kenya. Soon after that, the Tanzania crop gets ready. And it gets ready from around July, August. And then as it is maturing, it's being dried, it gets into the market, and at that time the prices in Kenya will be better than the prices in Tanzania. Therefore, you have an opportunity for grain farmers and producers in Tanzania to trade their maize across to Kenya. And after that, then the cycle goes back to the Kenya harvest. So what we are advocating at EAGC is the borders of the EAC in regard to food grains should actually be non-existent. We should be having our grains moving across the borders without borders. The only concerns we'll be looking at is to ensure that the grading and the safety measures have been addressed, so that we are getting good grain getting into the market. And because we are within one community, we are one customs community and all that, there is actually no tax that you are charged for trading your maize across the countries. And when we look at that whole region of Eastern Africa, we see what we produce and what we consume. We actually have enough to feed ourselves and to export outside the region, only if we allow regional trade to take place. If we do any other measures or government interventions like putting export bans and import bans and all these sort of things, then it doesn't benefit any of the countries, including the one that is putting the bans.
Let's stay on the issue of cross-border businesses. Tanzania has shown some resistance in doing, or rather engaging in business with Kenya. What are you doing about this kind of a situation?
Indeed, that is a concern, and the concern is not more from the producer, because that producer in Tanzania, being a rational person, would want to get the best price possible for their harvests, and so being able to find a market that gives that good price to the farmer is a motivation to the farmer, because you will again go and do much more production because you have a market. So whenever Tanzania puts any barriers to grain trade, bans or things like that, they actually end up hurting their own people in Tanzania, because that blockage of the trade means that the farmer cannot access a better price, and therefore the earnings to the farmer go very low, and at times they can even go into losses, and it becomes a disincentive. It becomes a discouraging factor for the farmers not to go back into the next season and do good production. Secondly, because as I said earlier on, Tanzania also actually buys maize from Kenya when the Kenya crop is on season. So when you do those blocks and you don't allow a process of better free movement of grain, it is disadvantageous both sides. So what are we doing? We have a very elaborate policy advocacy program where we are engaging policymakers in the region about the formation of policies, so that they can come up with policies that are more facilitative for the farmer and for the value chain to work better. So one of the solutions we have developed and we have been implementing in partnership with the EAC is a solution to to get a lot more information and knowledge, so that you are having evidence-based policy decisions being made. And what we have done to that end is we've come up with a tool we are calling the Regional Food Balance Sheet. So the regional food balance sheet is a concept borrowed from the accounting balance sheet concept. And so what we do with it is that we have a food balance sheet which looks at the food available in terms of the stocks you have, the harvests you're expecting, and so when you total all that, you get a summation of the total food available. Then you go down the balance sheet and you look at your utilization. So you project consumption, and in consumption you will take the number of people, the population, versus the daily consumption or monthly consumption. Then you go into industry, into processing, into flour, into animal feeds, into industrial conversions, all those sort of things. And then so you total up your total consumption versus your total available production and crops in granaries and warehouses, and you subtract the two to know whether you are in a surplus or you're in a deficit situation, to see how is the balance sheet situation. So how we do it is that we have a balance sheet for each country, food balance sheet, grains and cereals for Tanzania, for Kenya, for Uganda, for Rwanda, for Burundi, and then we bring it all together at the EAGC level. We now aggregate it into a regional food balance sheet, and then at the regional level we're able to see how do we sit. So every time we construct our regional food balance sheet, there's always surplus grains. But when you construct individual country level food balance sheet, some countries run deficits, you know, on an annual basis, 12 months process, where there will be a few months of surplus, which is then depleted, and you go into a deficit, and this deficit is what is filled up, that gap is filled through regional cross-border trade in grain.
On the food balance sheet issue, someone else would want to know, actually being a Kenyan, want to know what is the food balance sheet for Kenya looks like, and probably right now, how does it look like? If the trade,
cross-border trade in food grains does not take place, then the current situation is that what we produce on a 12 months period versus what we consume, we don't have enough. So Kenya is actually a good market for the region, which is a good thing that we are a market for the region, and that also creates good neighborliness, because remember also Kenya trades a lot in the region. We have a lot of industries and other high-level sophisticated productions around here, where the market for Kenya is the region. So it's also important that also Kenya provides a market for Uganda, a market for Rwanda, a market for Uganda, you know, and we have a better balance of trade payment. So to answer your question, if you look at it from Kenya only perspective, then I would say that yes, there are certain months of the year that we would be having deficits, and luckily, and this is something that we monitor, cross-border trade fills in that and actually puts the prices lower. If we didn't have cross-border trade taking place, the price of food and grains and flour would be going much higher than it goes. That food price stabilization is only made possible by the cross-border trade that is taking place in grain. From time to time, Gerard, we experience food shortages, especially in the northeastern areas in this country. What is the solution, the long-term solution to this kind of a problem? Our challenges in Kenya is that, first of all, our cost of production, our unit cost of production, producing a kilo or a ton of maize, the costs in Kenya are the highest in the region, and this is computations. These are computations we do all the time. We always look at what is the cost of production in Uganda, what is the cost of production in Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya. At the moment, Kenya is suffering the highest cost of production per kilo. One of the reasons is because our input costs are very high, and the other reason, and is a major reason, is that our productivity has been low and has actually been decreasing. So when you see what we are producing per acre, productivity, how many bags we're able to harvest per acre, we're nowhere near what should be the optimal or the potential that we can do. And one of the reasons why our productivity levels are low is because the fertility of our soils has been depleting over time, and the management of soils and good crop husbandry has also been a problem, especially managing soils. That understanding that the soil, the farm, has to have nutrients, has to have humus, has to have all those other microbial organisms that constitute a good fertile land. When it's depleted over time and it's not replenished, is what has actually brought down our current levels of productivity. And secondly, our utilization of synthetic fertilizers, where we've been utilizing them without doing soil analysis. So what has been happening is year on year, It's the same kind of fertilizer, so people bring their DAPs and their CAN in the same formulations, and they come and pour it onto the farms. They have not done any soil analysis. They do not know what exactly the soils are missing in terms of nutrients, so that you can provide for that. And secondly, even the application of fertilizers and all that has not been optimized, so that you give the crop the nitrogen and all the other nutrients that it requires for it to respond the way it's supposed to be to respond. So when we do our analysis, we actually realize that the fertilizer application levels is always below 50% of the recommended levels. So if you are going to put only 50% of what the crop wants, what do you expect in harvest? It will not get there. And that's all occasioned by the issue that a lot of farming and farmers who are doing the farming, knowledge levels have not been as good. You have also sort of a dichotomous situation where you have a lot of smallholder farmers, and then you have few, the medium level and other large scale farmers with utilizing different kind of technologies and farming practices and what have you, that affects and creates the disparity. So what we've seen is that there are some farmers in Kenya that are harvesting only 8 or 9 bags an acre. And there are still other farmers in Kenya who are getting 40 bags an acre in the same locality, same region. So if one person gets 40 bags, the other one is getting only 8 or 9 bags, surely. You can see the issues there, and that's what we are saying. We haven't addressed productivity properly, and also understanding that farming is long-term. Farming needs to be managed better. You need to retain do things that are retaining the sustainability and the fertility of the soils. And one of the other observations we've made is that there's been this practice of leasing land to do farming on short term, not long term. So when you do short term, then you only look at short term objectives, but agriculture and serious production is long term. You're looking at, you want to continue. So if you're going to do short term, is then you do things, then they deplete the soil, and then in a short while, then you're not able to get things better. So that approach is also a big issue.
There's been efforts by the government to have the commodity exchange actually begin and be a success. What is your take on the commodity exchange program? Structuring trade or structured trading systems include trade platforms, or a platform that can facilitate buyers and sellers to meet. And a commodity exchange is a variant of a trade platform, is one type of a trade platform. It's not the only trade platform or solution, but it's one type of a commodity, of a solution for the process. Commodity exchanges in their traditional setting and arrangements, they started long ago, actually offer quite a number of advantages that can help the industry. There are many advantages that a commodity market, a commodity exchange can provide. One of the advantages of a commodity exchange is it helps in price discovery, determining what should be the price, because it brings in a more formal and organized process of buyers and sellers getting into the marketplace, so that you have supply and demand coming in, and you have the forces of demand and supply sort of pushing to determine what should be the price. And so that gives you what we call a price discovery mechanism. When you look at the current markets that are structured and what have you, you hear maize is selling, but nobody will tell you what grade of maize is it. Is it grade 1? Is it grade 2 or 3? Who has graded it? Where is it? What quantity is it? And therefore you actually are not having like for like. So the current even information to say, oh, maize is 3,000 shillings a bag, or 28 or 25, what maize? What moisture content does it have? Is it 14 or 15? Because if it has 15% moisture content, it means therefore when you go to dry that maize, the weight will reduce from say 90 kilos to almost 70, 75, because of the water. So in a nutshell, I would say in the wider context of structured trading systems, then a commodity exchange is a component of structured trading system. A commodity exchange is the trading platform where people buy and sell, but it exists within an ecosystem that has warehouses, that has certification, that has financial institutions, and that has a trading platform where
you get all this happening. So it's something that can definitely transform the whole process. It can earn more income to farmers. It can assure consumers quality and better affordable prices. So it has its advantages as a solution. However, we also know that implementing a traditional commodity exchange in its traditional setting, like cut and paste sort of process, might have its own challenges, and we need to be cautious as we go that route.
On the matter of partnerships, how can farmers in this country maximize the opportunities of partnerships?
Opportunities exist in many ways. Number one, when you find, say, private sectors like the breweries. The breweries, they use sorghum, they use maize, they use barley to produce their beverages. These raw materials are produced by farmers. So straight away that creates an opportunity for partnerships where a farm like the breweries can contract producers, give them certain quantities, give them, the two can negotiate on pricing and things like that. And that partnership opens up very big opportunities, because, for example, if a farmer group signs a contract to supply the breweries with sorghums X amount of quantity, that contract alone can be converted into cash. You can actually get it discounted by a financial institution where they can give credit to the farmers to buy seeds, to buy inputs to produce, and then after the whole production is done, the farmers deliver to the off-taker, who in this case is the breweries, and then the breweries pays the financial institution that had given an advance or a loan, and the balances are paid to the farmers. So that partnership avails income or credit to the farmers to be able to produce, and it benefits everybody. The farmer benefits because they have a market, they get credit to be able to produce what they are producing, and they get the income that they would otherwise not have received without that partnership. So that's, for example, one example. There are other examples on a whole range of other value chain and commodities. For example, soya and soybean, big opportunity where soya processors can contract farmers to produce soya for them, and then through that contractual arrangement, you know that all this production, there will be somebody who will be taking it and at a good price, and that's a partnership that can thrive. Another example is also for exporters. There are exporters who have got opportunities or contracts to export, for example, green grams and chickpeas and cowpeas and all those to markets like India. So such an exporter has a partnership opportunity with farmers where they can contract farmers to produce. Then this exporter will take the grain and they export, and they can do all financing. The challenge has been that most farmer groups, and although this is a discipline that is now starting to change, what has been making it difficult for partnerships to be formed with farmers is that you would come, for example, as an off-taker, you provide the farmers with seeds and even with inputs, so you invest. Then they produce. When they produce, instead of delivering the produce to you, they side sell. They sell to other people. You go, you don't find anything, you lose your money. So what happens? You get discouraged. And then because you go, the farmer will have sold to that person they have sold, but that person might not come next. So you don't have long-term relationships that you can build on. So that issue of farmers side selling, and that lack of discipline and lack of respect for contracts and for agreements, and enforcing contracts, because if farmers do that, how are you going to enforce? Which court will you take them? At what cost? What will you be able to recover?
Okay. The agri-business projects seems to have very low financing. How can we have this agri-business actually have the amount of financing that can sustain it?
The first of the issues is that when we talk agri-business, we've been trying first of all to explain to people what do we mean, even to farmers. What do you mean by the term agri-business? It simply means that you're going to do your agriculture not for subsistence, for you to produce to eat in the household, but for you to produce for a market. So therefore, if you are going now to change, to stop producing for you as a consumer only, but to produce for a market, the first thing is that you have to find out and know and establish what is my market, who am I producing for which market. And so if you are to identify the market, then you'll know what is the market, what does that market require in terms of specifications, what product does it require, what quality, what safety, what parameters. Then even what prices are you expecting from that market. So once you get that information, then you will get to find out what inputs do I need, where will I even find the seed, what kind of seed, what variety, what sort of things do you need. So that's the first thing you sort out, and it's a shift, it's a mind shift, it's a paradigm shift. You still have the same resource set in your farm and everything else, but you are having now a shift so that you look at your operations as a business and not producing just for subsistence and that sort of level. So, and that already starts the change, because for example, if you are going to produce for a market like the breweries who want sorghum, we have very many varieties of sorghum. There's red sorghum, there's white sorghum, there are even within the red and white, there's many other varieties in there. So you need to establish what does, and then where do I get the seed for it? So they want white sorghum, gadam sorghum for their purposes. So when you then get to produce, you'll be producing knowing that you're producing for a market that has a certain price. The second thing you have to do, because now you're thinking business, is your costs. How much will it cost me as a producer to produce a kilo so that I can supply it to my market? You already know what the market is likely to give. For example, if it is 30 shillings per kilo or 28, whatever the price is, then you now look at your systems and say, in the 2 acres or 5 acres or 10 acres that I have, with the planting that I will do, with the fertilizers that I will put, with all the costs that I will incur, how much is it likely to cost me to produce a kilo? So after you have known that it will cost me 10 or 15 shillings, and then I sell it for 25 shillings or 28 shillings, then I have a profit, which I can now start focusing on. So then I will know if I will make 10 shillings as a farmer per kilo, this will be my profit. If I produce 50,000 kilos, this will be my profit. And so when you know that, it means therefore you will then manage your costs, you will do your things knowing that what you are producing for a market. And the minute that shift happens, you are no longer a poor smallholder subsistent farmer in knees, in tatters and begging, but you become a businessman and you start making money. And when those returns start coming, you invest them back and you are an empowered person. So that's the whole concept about agribusiness. Some people misconfuse it, misunderstand it. They think agribusiness is only setting up factories to process or doing this, that, and many other things. It is looking at the processes in the value chain and understanding that there are various stages in the value chain and deciding where in the value chain you will operate. It's very difficult for you to operate the whole process. You cannot be the producer and also the one processing to make beer or other beverages or make flour out of it. And we are seeing some people confusing farmers, trying to tell them that they will give them this, they will give them meals, they will convert them into millers. I think there we'll be losing the plot. What should be clear is that there is a clear value chain, and that when we are doing agribusiness, everybody makes their returns across the value chain and everyone specializes on their areas because it requires certain knowledge, expertise, technologies to do these things and to do them effectively and to do them well.
Let's talk about the Agri-Business Expo that is coming up in a few weeks. You've been doing this year after year. What are the emerging issues that you see in these expos?
We know there are many, there's agriculture show and agriculture show that goes on. But what we realized engaging with farmers, engaging with the stakeholders was that the focus of agribusiness was missing. You would find too many other things, including even plastics and what have you, and all sorts of kind of things being brought and traded, and loud music and all these sort of things that really don't give you the opportunity to learn. So then we came up with the idea that if we were to come up with an agribusiness fair and agribusiness expo, focusing purely and strictly only on agribusiness, then we would start doing things. So how did we do it? We decided that first of all, this process requires partnership. To do it all alone sometimes is very difficult, so we said we need to create partnership. And there we tried to show the latest technologies. So for instance, in the last few expos, we've been focusing on minimum tillage as a technology, introducing to farmers new things like planters for minimum tillage and strippers and all these sort of things, plus other kind of equipment and harvesters and all that that you can use. So that's a very, again, attractive area where we come, and usually our exhibitors get to sell.
And on that note, we wrap up Business Insight for this week. Always a pleasure to have you on board. Let's do this again next week. I'm Victoria Amunga. Good night and God bless you.